Hello, this is the Commercial Landscaper Podcast with Robert Clinkenbeard. This show will transform your leadership by developing all areas of your life, business, family, personal, and health. Only by fine-tuning yourself will you truly operate at a highly functioning leader. Super excited today to announce that we're just surpassed the 100th edition of the Commercial Landscaper Show. And we're going to see better things from us this year. We're going to be introducing some education, courses in leadership and sales that you could apply and join and try to improve yourself. So hopefully you can join us in some of these courses and reach out if you want to hear some new guests. This is all about bettering you, bettering your business, and make you function at a super high level. Thanks again, everyone. Cheers. Hi, this is Robert Clinkenbeard with the Commercial Landscaper Podcast. I am very honoured to have Verne Harnish as a guest today on the 100th episode. So Verne, thank you very much for joining me today.
Well, Robert, it's great to be a part of the 100th. And by the way, thank you for being a part of our Scaling Up coaching organization. Really greatly appreciate it.
No, thank you, Verne. I'm going to go through your bio really quick. I mean, I could probably go on for 10, 15 minutes just on all your achievements, but just to give a quick overview, you're the founder of the world-renowned EO Entrepreneurs Organization, which I'm obviously part of. There's now 16,000 members worldwide. You've chaired the CEO program held at MIT, which again, I went through that, and it was a life changer for me to go through that program. Of course, you're the founder, CEO of the ScaleUp, a global executive education and coaching company with 200 plus partners in 6 continents. So you've been, spent nearly 4 decades helping companies scale up, which is tremendous. You've written, I believe, 4 books, which includes the Mastering the Rockefeller Habits and Scaling Up, of course, which the 2.0 of Rockefeller Habits. And then the recent one we're going to talk about today is the compensation, scale up compensation. So love to talk to you a little bit about that. You've also chaired the annual ScaleUp Summits. You're on numerous boards around the country, involved in different private investing. So Verne, there's a long list of things. I'm sure there's probably a couple of things I've missed off that.
Well, it's interesting. I'm also on the board of John Mooney's company, Focal Point, which is one of the leading landscaping organizations here in the United States. So I've really had a chance to get kind of a under the hoods look. And then I was I'm an investor in Barrett Ersich's company, Holganics.
Right.
So he was a student of mine first when he built out his landscaping or lawn care organization, sold it successfully, and now he's really working to replace kind of all of the commercial fertilizers. And boy, the results that we've been getting have been fantastic for landscapers.
No, that's awesome. Actually, interesting side story before we jump into Barrett was one of the first EO events I went to when I first joined. I mean, literally about a month after I joined, here he was, and he was talking about landscaping. I thought, wow, this is such a interesting first speaker. So yeah, I remember him well.
Yeah. And one of the things that he did, which I had challenged early on everybody at the MIT program, everyone who could replace Excel spreadsheets with maps would dominate their industry. And Barrett was really one of the first to aggressively partner with Microsoft and now what is called Bing Maps, so that he could really maximize the routes, for instance, of all of his lawn care trucks and crews. And when he was doing acquisitions, he could actually layer over, upon each other, the customer group that he was buying and see what it would do to further maximize the routes of his crews, be additive versus take away from it. And he began to monitor, like, for instance, all callbacks. And by putting those on maps, he could see patterns much quicker and see where he had issues with crews and not. So his real advanced use of maps in order to really drive the industry, I thought was legendary.
No, I agree 100%. And that actually ties in nicely with, one of my first questions is that, we have all this data now being, thrown at us from all different angles. We're going through all these different challenging times between, the recession, between supply chain issues, labor going up, materials going up as well. How have you seen companies be able to use this data to sort of navigate through these effectively uncharted territories?
Yeah. Well, the good news is whenever there's challenges in the industry, it really creates blocking strategies. First, it has a tendency to kind of clean out, the weak that are in an industry, which often their predatory pricing and all of that can be cumbersome for the industry. So it sort of wipes them out. And if you can solve and address those problems, you're going to keep the business. On the flip side, I remember one of my first students at MIT, Brad Feld, who was in the IT services business. And that was really a terrible business back then. It's still not much better today, but he was holding on to his customers. And he went out and asked them, all right, why am I keeping you even though we continue to make mistakes? And with supply chain challenges and things like that, we can't help ourselves in our industry. And his customers said, well, Brad, you guys just suck less than everybody else. So I think in some sense, if you can just suck less than the competition, that is a strategic advantage in the marketplace.
No, I agree 100%. And how when you go in and visit companies and you see either the stress look in their face or they're sort of dealing with another challenges come up, how in your experience, I mean, you as I say, you've been working in 4 decades, working in companies, we've never seen a lot of those challenges. How are you giving them sort of guidance on how to work through some of those challenges and change that mindset?
Yeah, well, it always comes down to communication. Whether you're in a marriage, a relationship, or you're running a company. And in fact, you can't over communicate, particularly in times that are rough. People want to know, first of all, what's on your mind as the leader. So one of the things that John Mooney does, I recommend all CEOs do as part of my CEO bootcamp, is you absolutely have to send out a message weekly to all of your people. They want to know what you're thinking. Are you aware of the challenges? Are you willing to share your vulnerabilities and just be in communication versus the sense that you're hiding out? And that was the first thing that Greg Brenneman, I actually had a chance to have dinner last week with him and his wife. He's the one who turned around Continental Airlines. And he said the first thing that he did is he sent out a voicemail message that all the mechanics and the pilots and the flight attendants, because that company was in massive trouble. They were last place. And by communicating weekly, he began to give them assurances that, first of all, there was some leadership that was actually at the top of the organization. And so that's where we got the idea from. And as you know, I do the same thing with our global coaching partners every Friday. I kind of share what I'm up to, what I'm thinking, and just so that you guys know that I'm around and paying attention to what's going on in the marketplace. So number one is the CEO sending out a weekly, I don't care if it's a video, it's an audio, it's an email, all of your crews and your people, so they get a sense that you're there, that you're at the top of the helm, and for you to acknowledge, hey, we ran into this week, and I want to thank this crew for pushing through on that pain, and hey, we're working on this supply chain issue, and we're going to have, we're out of books, by the way, myself. We're having supply chain issues, and we were managing those yesterday, and I'll be communicating with the coaching partners tomorrow that we've got 5,000 more copies coming in here in the next 3 weeks because we are absolutely out. So communication. Number two, then obviously at the heart of our work is the daily huddle. So making sure that all of the crews are having some kind of a daily meetup to where they can get a sense of, okay, what's up today? Are there going to be any things in our way? Let's give people a heads up, any constraints or barriers. And then obviously looking at the results and the KPIs. And there's something about seeing things daily that allow you then to see the pattern in a week versus if you only get data once a week or once a month, it's going to take you months in order to see what's going on. So if you want to move faster and react faster, you need to pulse faster, which is really at the heart of our scaling up methodology.
No, I love that. And when you were talking there, it reminded me of actually when I first came across to the States, I went to work for this large company in Phoenix, And for long periods of time, the owner, the CEO was MIA. And so all these people were wondering, well, where's the company going? We have all these challenges, and they almost started to fill that void with their own, chatter, and it was just really divisive. People start leaving. So I can agree 100%. If you have that leadership providing that clear communication to the team and give that sense of stability and that direction, I think it makes such a big difference.
Robert, you're absolutely right. If you don't fill that void, they're going to fill it for you with all kinds of other stories. And I want all the listeners to know that lots of top leaders do this. Michael Dell, I first saw Michael, I've known him his second year in business. He sends out an email every week to all of his employees. Mark Zuckerberg at Meta, it's a Q&A with Mark, and it's every Thursday at 5:00 Pacific time. And so real leaders of real companies make sure that they're in this kind of weekly communication with everybody in terms of what they're thinking and feeling.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So I'm going to switch directions a little bit. I know you touched on the ScaleUp compensation book. What was the initial driver for you to come out with this book? Was that sort of feedback you were getting from some of your clients? Was it from the coaching community?
Yeah, well, for most companies, it's the largest expense. Yet we don't give it much time in thought. We have a tendency just to kind of piece it together. As we're scaling the company, we cut a deal here, we cut a deal there. We're making stuff up as we go. And at some point, it's a mess. And if you don't think employees are communicating about it, they are. Ben Horowitz has talked about it deeply in his book, how folks just inadvertently talk about what other people are making in the organization. And your goal is to drive energy. You're the chief energy officer, CEO. And what you don't want is for your compensation to be a downer, to be creating this unnecessary drama inside the organization. So we really felt we need to show a way to how to get it right and out of sight. We know there's a lot of other cultural things that are important. And if you've got those in place, pay can move down the scale. But with inflation upon us and everything else that we're feeling in terms of economic pressures, wages have gone to number one in even the best places to work CEO's agenda. So we thought it was time to kind of bring a simple book, one you can read very quickly, 100 pages, not the 1,200 that a lot of comp books are, that really addresses what are the 5 fundamental principles of getting your compensation scheme right. And by the way, one of the key messages, I've been sharing it with John Mooney we've got a board meeting coming up here in a few weeks in St. Louis, is you've got a fundamental decision, and that is, first, don't worry about what you pay people. Instead, what you're trying to focus on is what is your labor cost per dollar of revenue, or better, per gross margin dollar of revenue. And what you're generally trying to do is figure out how can we have less people paid more with a lower total wage cost than have a whole lot of lower paid people that in some cases aren't as productive. So I'd rather have less better paid productive than a lot more lower paid, less productive employees. And when you go out and you look at your crews, inevitably, you've got individuals and crews that in general can produce 3x what other individuals and crews can produce. And as a result, you ought to be rewarding accordingly. And so if you can, like a Container Store, they pay people twice as much as any retailer, yet their people are 3 times more productive. You will end up with lower labor costs per square foot or dollar of revenue. And that's what you want to get focused on.
Yep, I agree 100%. And if that is also helped by looking at things like what's the other technology or machinery out there that can help with the productivity, or looking at routing on a regular basis. So I think all those things come a long way, because you're right, there's so much of a shortage of good labor out there, but when you find them, let's pay them fairly, but also look at how can you improve your productivity. And I think a lot of people are still stuck in the old traditional ways of doing things, and they're the ones who are trying to catch up and dealing with all the the issues that they're facing.
Well, and that's again why I was impressed with Barrett Ursick. Barrett really was early on using technology and AI to truly maximize the routes of his teams, and to inform the salespeople that there were better sales than not, because it would either improve the route or make it more difficult for the crews to get out to where they needed to do the work. And also just getting better customers. One of the things I think John Mooney's done well is to really be much more particular about the high-end customers that he's serving, that are able then to provide some of the much better margins. And as a result, then you can pass that on in terms of wages. And so if you can get a good customer strategy, then you can have what we call a good job strategy. And it becomes a virtuous cycle instead of a vicious cycle that you're having to fight.
No, I agree 100%. I think the other thing that Barrett did was, I think, able to produce a turnaround estimates really quick by using that data. I think before somebody needed to go out to measure everything, and I think he was doing a lot of those measurements through the maps you talked about.
Yeah, he'd actually tied into the courthouse records, and so he could. What usually took a 5-week process to close a residential customer,
right?
He could do it in 5 minutes. And I remember, it took him about 10 years to get to 6,000 customers. He doubled to 12,000 in 5 weeks when he unleashed his system in Baltimore, Maryland. It's one of the reasons why later on he got acquired for $1 gazillion. When ChemLawn said, "All right, we give, you guys have figured out something we haven't," and that's why he's off on a second company, Organics.
Yeah, that's awesome. Verne, what was one of the things that was uncovered when you started doing your research for scaling up compensation? Something that maybe popped up as maybe just a light bulb moment, or something you weren't really necessarily expecting as you did that research?
It was one that John Summers, John's not running Facebook or Google. He's got a commercial printing company called Allied Printing. And it was something clever that he did with bonuses. And I think it is important for business owners to have a broad company-wide bonus that's shared on top of the normal pay and compensation that you provide. And to the extent that it can add, say, 15 to 20% to the overall compensation. The key, though, is how you do that. First, do not pay it quarterly. You want it to be paid sometime after the end of the year. Otherwise, it becomes part of the expected base compensation. And therefore, it loses all of its excitement and motivation. Second, one of the smart things that he does is he only pays out company-wide 50% of the bonus annually. The other 50% sits in buckets, vests over the next 6 years, and an employee only gets those buckets of money if they're still with the company. And it really plays to that idea of Robert Cialdini's that people do more to avoid a loss than to get a gain. And let me say that again, people do more to avoid a loss than to get a gain. And so employees are going to think twice about leaving, even for higher wages, if they have those big pots of money sitting out there as far as 6 years out. And the other thing that's nice is it somewhat forces a lot of employees to have a savings plan. If you're paying fairly a living wage, then those bonuses can really be building so that they've got savings, so they could use it towards purchasing a home or an automobile or their children's education. And so the smart use of that bonus money, I think, is something that John Summers has really thought through there at Allied Printing.
No, I love that, because yes, I understand a lot of people do live, week to week on the money coming in, but they also struggle with trying to save that money for, what happens maybe if they start getting ill or they have to retire early. But nice having those buckets available. And I think what I recognize going in and, coaching a lot of my clients, a lot of them are struggling with trying to come up with some type of golden handcuffs type program. So I love the idea of, putting some of that money back putting it into some buckets, investing it so that, yeah, it's a little bit of golden handcuffs, but you're also taking care of the long-term health of your employees and their families.
The other thing I think that you brought up is that the importance of paying people quickly. The old days, it was a day's work deserved a day's pay. If you're paying everybody every 2 weeks, you're really scaling on the backs of their cash. So Chula, who we feature, they're in the restaurant business, which is even a tougher industry than the landscaping industry. In fact, we've been encouraging landscapers, the best fishing hole that they can go get talent are short order cooks, because those folks are used to working in the heat of a kitchen, and they're often having to work evenings and weekends. What's nice about, the landscaping industry is you can work 9 to 5 and you can be home, for dinner and be there with your family. And so we found that's a good fishing hole in order to find talent or short order cooks. And so anyway, it's really a tough group to hold on to. But Chula, who we mentioned in the book, they're a new Indian fast casual concept that we expect is going to go to $1 billion. They are really utilizing, as Walmart is, some of the new fintech technologies where their employees can draw on their wages daily or hourly if they need to. Otherwise, you leave your employees kind of open to these payday loan sharks that have huge usury kind of interest rates. And they have found that that's been very attractive in the market, that their employees can access their wages daily if they need to. And I just was driving by, I think it was either a Dunkin' Donuts or something, but they were advertising the fact that, hey, come work for us and you can get paid daily. And so you can take a look at some of these new fintech like Pay Active and Daily Pay that allow your employees to have access to their pay when they need it.
No, I love those ideas. And what it reminds me of is that, I love the landscape, excuse me, the landscape industry. I love the people in it. I love their ability to share. But I think one of the biggest, I suppose, things that opened my mind is when I started to get involved in EO and being around different businesses, you started to hear some of those different ideas that I could then bring back to my business. So that the thought of having that daily access to their wages is again that differentiator. And how can I get better than any other landscape industry within my city by having things like that? I think is huge. And I think a lot of people don't spend enough time on that, accessing other business owners, but just that innovative thinking.
Yeah.
So pretty interesting.
Good. So anyway, I hope everyone will take, a moment, a couple hours and read through the book and see if there's some kind of ideas that you can use to take that same pot of money that you're spending right now on wages and get a better bang for your buck moving forward. Yeah.
Verne, we're finishing up here shortly. What any other parting words of wisdom as you coach some of these massive organizations around the world and see some of their challenges, see some of their opportunities, and then apply that to the landscape industry? I've got a bunch of other contractors that follow the show. What would be some of their words of wisdoms as they try and navigate through the next 12, 18 months, which potentially could be challenging depending on mindset? But I think a lot of this to do with just who you surround yourself with, whether it be coaches, mentors, business groups out there.
Yeah, for sure. We know that leaders are readers, they're learners. It's really what turned around Microsoft. Their CEO said, we really took off when we switched from being a know-it-all culture to a learn-it-all culture. And just the fact that you're willing to kind of invest, have a book club or invest in the training and development in the minds of your people, in addition to yourself, I think is critical. And then, of course, Scott Fuqua is a big fan of ours with Atlassian. They're one of the more successful Australian companies out of Sydney. And it was nice. Scott just addressed the board of Wells Fargo, and he was kind enough to give me a shout out. I heard at the board,
nice.
And what he said in his endorsement of the book, which I'm moving to the front in the new revised edition is, at the end of the day, it comes down to two things: discipline and focus. And so the disciplines, the Rockefeller Habits Checklist, and commercial pilots wouldn't expect, and they have the best safety record in the world. Them and the mechanics wouldn't expect to have that plane take off without going through the discipline of those checklists. You're piloting your company. And so we think it's critical that you stick to those disciplines as well. And then understand, what is the focus today? What's everyone's priority today? What is it we need to do this week? Where are we going over the next quarter? And what is it we hope to accomplish over the next 10 years? And, there's a lot of roll up going on in the landscaping industry, and folks are saying, well, I hope to be out of this business in 10 years. But remember, when you sell the company, you're selling the future. And so the reason you want to stay focused out 10 years is when you do go to sell, you can say, look, with your resources, we've got this kind of runway and this kind of legs, and therefore you can get much higher valuation. So be clear where you're headed over the next 10 years, and then figure out what you have to do today. Everything else in between is kind of a wild ankle guess, as we say.
I love that. Love that. Verne, it's been such a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you for sharing all your wisdom. I look forward to further conversations. Looking forward to seeing you at the ScaleUp Summits coming up soon.
You bet.
Verne, thank you again for your time today.
You got it, Robert. Thank you.
That was the Commercial Landscaper podcast, hosted by Robert Clinkenbeard, and I'm the author of the Ironman Mindset for Entrepreneurs. If you want to find out more about the show, you're welcome to go to thecommerciallandscaper.com, or if you want to learn more about courses, education, buying some books, even if you want to just drop a note and suggest a guest, I'd love to hear from you. Again, this is Robert Clinkenbeard, the Commercial Landscaper podcast. Cheers, everyone.